going back to the 2020 election, JD Vance had the opportunity once again. He was asked by a New York Times reporter in a sit down. I think the interview from the New York Times, did Donald Trump win the 2020 election? And this is just fascinating that these people cannot simply answer this question. I mean, you would think strategically that they would finally get with these people at least 2 years ago and say, look, if you're asked this question, just say, yeah, he won and move on. Because guess what? In 2023, you're never going to be asked it again. In 2024, you're never going to be asked it again. And 2024 is going to be kind of important because that's an election year. So the quicker we can get this question out of our lives, the better. Yeah, maybe Donald Trump will be upset for a day or two. But if we have learned anything in this country, that if you can just get through one event, people will forget about it sometimes the next day, sometimes the next week. I mean, we had a potential president of the United States, a presidential candidate. He was shot at about 2 months ago. And now people don't, you would think it was 3 years ago. Nobody talks about it. Nobody gives a shit about it. But you would think that they would have strategized this a little bit better. But nope. Here we go. JD Vance, couple-minute clip, and I'm going to let the whole thing play because it's pretty freaking fascinating that you cannot answer this question still. And it is unbelievable.
You were asked to clarify if you believe Trump lost the 2020 election. Do you believe he lost the 2020 election?
I think that Donald Trump and I have both raised a number of issues with the 2020 election, but we're focused on the future. I think there's an obsession here.
First time asked.
Here with focusing on 2020. I'm much more worried about what happened after 2020, which is a wide open border, groceries that are unaffordable. And look,
Senator,
Lulu,
yes or no?
Okay.
Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Let me ask you a question. Is it okay that big technology companies censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, which independent analysis have said it cost Donald Trump millions of votes?
First of all, I want to address that. That independent people said that it cost Donald Trump millions of votes. Who are these independent people? Nobody, there is nobody legitimately that came out and said that a story about Hunter Biden's laptop, he's talking about big tech. What he's talking about is that Twitter, for less than 24 hours, suppressed the story because there was really no proof to it. But the next day, they allowed the story to be on their site. So if you are naive enough to believe that Twitter suppressing a story about, again, let's go Hunter Biden's laptop. Second of all, what about Hunter Biden's laptop that we have heard to this day? Tell me something that you have heard this day, because Hunter Biden's laptop is out there now. So tell me exactly what anybody would have heard at that time where people will go, holy shit, I am absolutely not voting for Donald Trump because this was in Hunter Biden's laptop. This is something that I wish that this journalist would have asked him, but her job is to get her to answer his questions. It's her job to get him to answer her questions. It is not her job to answer his questions. But this is something that the media and journalists need to start learning to do, is that this is how they're going to deflect. They're going to start asking you questions knowing that you're not there to answer their questions. So they're going to skip over and not push back on it. But that's something that I hope and wish that they would start doing.
Senator Vance, I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Did big technology companies censor a story that independent studies have suggested would have cost Trump millions of votes?
Senator
I think that's
Vance,
the question.
I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
And I've answered your question with another question. You answer my question and I'll answer yours.
I have asked this question repeatedly. It is something that is very important for the American people to know. There is no proof, legal or otherwise, that Donald Trump did not lose the
But
2020 election.
you're repeating a slogan rather than engaging with what I'm saying.
That's
which is
just a
that when
fact.
our own technology firms engage in industrial scale censorship, by the way, backed up by the federal government in a way that independent studies suggest affect the votes.
Now he's steering
I'm
away
worried
from the
about Americans
conversation.
who feel like there were problems in 2020. I'm not worried about this slogan that people throw. Well, every court case went this way. I'm
That's
talking
not
about something very discrete, a problem of censorship in this country that I do think affected things in 2020, and more importantly, that led to Kamala Harris's governance, which has screwed this country up in a big way.
Senator,
didn't.
would you have certified the election in 2020? Yes or no?
New
I've
question.
said that I would have voted against certification because of the concern that I just raised. I think that when you have technology companies,
The answer is no.
when you have technology companies censoring Americans at a mass scale in a way that, again, independent studies have suggested affect the vote, I think that it's right to protest against that, to criticize that, and that's a totally reasonable thing.
So the answer is no. And
Yeah, it'd be difficult for me to interview these people. And I think to be a real journalist, like a top journalist, you have to have some patience and you have to have some candor. I would have said, no. I'm not, be quiet. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you with you trying to tell me this is a slogan or, something that I am making up. 60 court cases legitimately threw out your cases because you had zero case. And in fact, Trump appointed judges throughout your case because you had no case. If you think you're going to sit here and use slogans against me and calling my stuff slogans, you're out of your fucking mind. Now answer the fucking question. Did he or did he not win the election? Just say yes or no. If you want to say no, be a man and say no, he didn't win it. But you're going to sit here and dance around it and you think you're going to play around with me. That ain't happening. And again, I wouldn't do very good. I wouldn't be able to handle it. And people would have probably looked at me and go, this guy's flying off the fucking handle. He can't be interviewing people. And they'd be right. I wouldn't disagree or argue with them. But that is, to me, it's very dangerous. And she's right. This is important, that if you are going to run for president and you are going to be the vice presidential candidate, if you cannot answer the question, who won the 2020 election and did they win it fairly? If you can't answer that question, and again, I can't even believe that we're having this conversation because this is not what politics has ever been. There's always been, contentious moments between Democrats and Republicans. There's always been differences. But the one thing that you at least could say up to a certain point is that the Democrats that were in Washington and the Republicans that were in Washington and the independents that were in Washington, they could all be in the same room and speak on personal levels and get along with each other to some extent. But there wasn't this childish hatred that you have for somebody across the aisle. And now we are in a very dangerous place in this country where if you are on the other side, and yeah, I'm going to say this in particular, if you are a Democrat to a Republican, you are the enemy. Now, Democrats don't necessarily look at Republicans as the enemy. They will look at this MAGA movement and they will look at the people who subject themselves to MAGA as being somebody who definitely is trying to destroy this country. Now, again, on the opposite side, they think that the Democrats are trying to destroy this country. But the Democrats would absolutely never, ever have a candidate come in and say, I want to be dictator on day one. They would never, ever, ever say, this election was stolen from me and get people riled up enough to go to the Capitol and attack it. Now, before you even try to think you're going to throw Hillary Clinton at me and say she denied that she lost the election and that Russia gave Donald Trump help. Number one, the very next day, Hillary Clinton called Donald Trump and conceded. Number 2, Hillary Clinton brought 0 cases to court to try to have the election overturned. Number 3, Hillary Clinton didn't try to get a bunch of people to storm the Capitol to stop the certification of the election. Number 4, she didn't have subsets of groups trying to undermine the election and trying to put together fake electors to try to say, I'm not going to certify the votes for this particular state. And number 5, most importantly, Russia 100%, not 99, not 98, not 90, 100% interfered in this election. There is 0 question about it. There are full reports from Robert Mueller that clearly stated that Russia interfered in our election with the intent of Donald Trump to win. Now, if your argument is that there was no proof that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to do that, you have an argument there. Nobody is saying that. But 100%, let me back up before you people lose your mind. Yeah, maybe some people were going, Donald Trump colluded with Russia. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe they weren't. I'm still not convinced that they didn't, but I'm not using that as a top talking point. We're going to let that slide. We're going to say Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. Doesn't matter. Russia did have something to do with the 2016 election. They 100% interfered with it. There are Trump associates that went to jail for it who ask them, why were they in prison if there was absolutely 0 collusion at all, or there was 0 interference between Russia and what happened in this idea that we're continuing to let that slide too, that Russia had nothing to do with it. And they keep using this term, Russia, Russia, Russia. What the fuck are you talking about, Russia? Yeah, Russia 100%. Vladimir Putin, his people, definitely interfered in this election to try to get Donald Trump to win. And a lot of that came from misinformation and disinformation, and it hit Facebook in a way that that platform had never seen before. You got to remember, Facebook was still sort of in its infancy stages at that time, especially when it came to expanding more than, hey, Jesus Christ, it's Greg from high school. I haven't seen Greg or Tammy or whoever it is that you started making friends with in high school. Now it started to expand more to news, and it started expanding more to links and channels and stuff like this. And Russia saw that, and they masterfully put together a campaign against Hillary Clinton, and not just against Hillary Clinton. They sowed a lot of doubt between all different kinds of people and all different kinds of voters, that mass chaos started happening online, and people were questioning whether or not Hillary Clinton really was somebody that we should be voting for. And maybe we should be voting for this new guy who is a multimillionaire, and he's going to run our country like a business, even though Russia left out the fact that the businessman that they were helping out was one of the worst businessmen you'll ever see in your entire life. I encourage anybody, go get the book Lucky Loser, or just watch any documentary about Donald Trump as a businessman. Just type in documentary, Donald Trump, businessman. Watch it, and you'll find out he was horrific. He was garbage, terrible businessman. But anyway, it's very frustrating to talk about this stuff. It's going to get very frustrating in the next 3 weeks. Let's wrap up. You know, there's always Trump clips to play. And as I've said before on this show, that I'm hoping to get to the point where we are, the only Trump clips that we are playing is him whining about losing, about the instructions that he is giving to his flying monkeys to put on their little militia costumes to go out and try to cause havoc because he lost. I don't know that he's going to get the same amount of flying monkeys that he got last time. He's going to get some for sure. I mean, there are people who live their whole lives to be a Donald Trump flying monkey, and that it's just the most proudest and greatest thing that they could wear on their shirt as a badge of honor, even though they look like fucking morons.